Welcome to the VC React podcast. Every week, we bring you insights and reactions from top VCs reacting to latest news on MENA startups and investments. Our VC guests today are Tamer Azer, partner at Shuruk Partners, and Tarek Seif Nasr, head of venture growth at Falak startups. In the description below, you can find more details on our guests, their LinkedIn profiles, websites, and portfolio companies. Our weekly news are brought to you by FWDstart, a news aggregator that sends you MENA news direct to your inbox twice a week. And from FWDstart, as always, we have Jamie. Jamie, what's happening this week?
Good morning, Ahmad. I've done it again. I've said good morning. This is the second week in a row. This is going to become a recurring joke, I think, at this point. So I'm just going to keep it going. I think it's for the best. But yeah, look, we have a fascinating acquisition story, I think, to kick start things today, actually, which sees a Saudi startup acquiring a Silicon Valley-based company, which, needless to say, doesn't happen every day. So that Saudi startup in question is VCap. So they're a construction management and Internet of Things platform founded in 2017 by Hassan Al-Balawi and Ashita co-chair. So just in terms of the product, but exactly what it does, essentially collects data through a knob that attaches to a standard hard hat worn on construction sites, and pipes that data into an app, so tracks hours, progress, safety, etc., all that fun stuff. They're currently being used by crews in over 30 megacities. It seems like a big sort of giga project use case here, so Saudi Arabia, but used in the US as well. The company that they've acquired is Cruise by Core, so they said Valley-based. I guess you could say they're building a kind of Trello equivalent for the global construction industry, so essentially makes it easier for foremen to make schedules, chat with crew members, write progress reports, etc. So they were founded back in 2019 by Diane Eisner. She previously led Waze as director of growth through their 1.3 billion acquisition by Google. To date, Cruise by Core, they had raised 11 million from investors before exiting early in the interest of, according to Eisner, commenting on this, scaling faster. So just a small bit of maybe background to the deal and maybe the way the construction works with regard to tech integration broadly. So I guess it's a kind of peculiar industry in that projects typically involve over, hundreds of different suppliers and subcontractors. Each of those has their own technology. So very fragmented and kind of decentralized, which does lead to kind of, I guess, fewer scale-ups or unicorns compared to other sectors like logistics or manufacturing, for example. So earlier this year, Eisner, she began, in her own words, looking for ways for Cruise by Core to surpass their own growth limitations and grow. So that led her, by chance, she was at the Future Investment Initiative Institute Priority Summit in Riyadh. That's where she met VCap's Al-Balawi. Both kind of have complementary products, I guess you could say. Al-Balawi wants to expand to the US. Eisner was keen to go to Saudi, match made in heaven, some would argue. So the acquisition itself, it's an all-stock deal. So that'll see Eisner, she's going to stay on as Chief Strategy Officer. And you're going to see the Cruise by Core CTO, Gene Gutnick, is going to lead tech for the combined company. They're going to they're going to open an R&D headquarters in Silicon Valley. In terms of combined customers, you're looking at Saudi Aramco, Jeddah Central Development Co., Cruise by Core. They had a number of Japanese general contractors, so Kojima, Tanaka. And it's peculiar in that Eisner commented as well that Cruise by Core had more than a year's runway left as well. So they're in a relatively strong position. But it was more so that this, I guess, as you mentioned, Ahmad, is it a merger? Is it a partnership? What exactly is it? For her, it was just the best strategic decision to accelerate growth. And Al-Balawi emphasized as well, obviously, just the credibility and scaling expertise that comes with the Silicon Valley presence.
Okay, so thank you, Jamie. I have so many questions about this deal. Congrats to both companies. It's an amazing thing that's happening here. A Saudi company acquiring a Silicon Valley company, as you mentioned, Jamie. Now, according to PitchBook, I can see here that they WakeCap has raised a total of $37 million only over the past few years. And only this January 2024, they raised $25 million. And I don't know if they have enough funding to acquire a company. I don't know about their revenues, annual revenues, but it doesn't seem to me that it's a big acquisition, given the numbers we know about WakeCap. It might be more of a merger than an acquisition. But in any case, it's very exciting news.
I always find it interesting when like a very traditional industry starts getting disrupted. And my first reaction is like, how are they combining? Like, I feel like they're just trying to combine the two forces. And I found what's very, very interesting is that the research development will be in Silicon Valley. So they're combining both, and like they're using the top innovation of Silicon Valley and Saudi. So I think it's a very, 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 it's quite a very interesting merger. They're using this merger to have the top talent of Silicon Valley as their research development. And that's one of the reasons. Yeah.
So what's really interesting to you, Tarek, is they're tapping into the talent of Silicon Valley.
Exactly, the talent, exactly.
Yeah, this is really new for Saudi, but we've seen similar activities in Dubai earlier when Kareem started hiring people from Silicon Valley, or maybe Arab Americans who wanted to come back to the region, and Kareem was hiring a lot of these targets. Tamer, what do you think?
I think it's very exciting, right? So the region, there's a lot of macro things to think about. First of all, the region is one of the very few regions in the world that's actually growing at a pace that's exciting, right? So we're seeing a lot of companies, a lot of talent, whether it's people from a Middle Eastern background wanting to move back, or even people from all over the world are thinking of the Middle East very, very differently now, right? It's a space of opportunity. It's a space where exciting things are happening. On the investment side, it's cool to see something go the other way, right? Usually what goes the other way is big entities like sovereign wealth funds making massive investments, billions and billions of dollars. It's nice to see that start trickling down to the level of companies that are in our industry, right? So you can see the big companies going one way, the big sort of sovereigns going the other way. So now we're starting to see this happen at the level of early stage companies once they sort of mature and grow enough. And people are thinking of the region very differently. And even people within the region are thinking very differently, right? It's very rare for us to have heard of transactions of that nature. Usually it's the other way around. When you go and ask, when you ask people, hey, what is your exit? Oh, I'm going to sell to a US company, right? Well, look now, actually a US company, whether it's a merger or an acquisition, I think it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we're seeing corridors become a lot more active, and in both directions, not just in a singular direction.
Have we seen a lot of construction tech investments in the past few years in MENA? We talked last episode, we talked about the fintech environment in here, and everyone is excited about fintech. But what about construction tech? Do you have any portfolio companies in that sector?
There's construction tech mostly started, I would say, 4, maybe 5 years ago with scheduling. Right. So everybody was building scheduling technology for all the different shifts and all the different people in a construction site. Bit by bit, that moved to task assignments and managing the workflow of folks. And that was, I would say, the first wave. Then we started seeing another wave of sort of marketplaces, materials, equipment rentals. So just like every other industry, it starts off with one thing and then it continues to scale. Right. So it's exciting to see the journey of construction tech. It's super relevant to some of the markets in the region, if not all of them, because all of us are investing massively, not just in mega projects, but also in infrastructure projects. Right. So there's a lot of capital across the region that's going to infrastructure projects. There's a lot of capital in the region that's going to mega projects, whether things like NEOM or the new administrative capital in Egypt. These are massive, massive, massive undertakings. Right. So there is a lot of capital that's going into this industry, and it would make sense that now we're starting to see some of these companies start to scale, start to expand regionally. And I think this space is going to be very, very exciting.
There's also like I've seen like startups trying to facilitate between the developer and the suppliers, because I think one of the things that was like difficult in the industry was having a good flow between the supplier and the developer. So I think we've been seeing a lot of this with them. There's been a lot of startups that are trying to work on the supply space for the construction industry.
Yeah, Tarek, yeah, I think we have seen, at least I can remember one, and if any of you remembers any other construction tech companies, please mention it. I remember Brex by Brahim Manna. He's an ex-Kareem. Jamie, do you know any other construction tech companies?
Yeah, just one more. Just 2 weeks ago, UAE-based Contech called Tendered. It's actually YC backed, founded in 2019, back 2018 even, by Aryan Mohan. So AI powered, as every company is at the moment. So essentially offers insights into kind of asset utilization and reduces emissions, all that kind of things. But that was led by AP Muller. So they're the big shipping. I think they're the biggest shipping logistics company in the world. So that was pretty interesting as well.
There's a lot of expansion into new verticals, right? And that's emblematic of an industry. People in tech are seeing an industry scale and they're reacting to it. And how can we support this industry? How can we increase efficiency? How can we optimize this industry?
Exactly.
And that's what tech does best.
Before we move on to the next story, I noticed, I looked at the founders of the acquired company, and it looks like, I think there were 4 founders, 3 of them are ex-WeWork. When a company is big enough to have hundreds of employees and it's a big success story or failure story, some of those employees will start branching out or leaving and starting their own companies. And the biggest story is PayPal Mafia. We've seen this with Kareem. I don't know if there's a name for the Kareem gang or something.
No, but I also think that, I believe they also call them the Kareem Mafia. Like I think
Kareem Mafia.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've
so we
seen,
have a Kareem
I've
Mafia.
seen that. Yes,
I think
no,
it should be.
a lot of them also, and also Uber. I have to give a lot of credit to Uber. I think like a lot of their team, they started a lot of startups.
Yeah.
Like
and back in the days, I think there was Maktub guys who left and started their own group. I don't know. Other than that, what do we have? And what's happening now to Uber Mafia or Kareem Mafia? Where are they? How can we get to them and see their updates and news?
Well, one of my favorite startups was from someone from Uber. It's called Thunder. And basically, Thunder is they're like one of the first platforms where anybody could invest in stocks. And I personally use it a lot. I think it changed how people invest in Egypt, because like before there wasn't a really a way like in order to invest like online or like on an app, and they really are the first ones to do that. And it got you to learn about like I think it educated, because one of the best things about what Thunder does is they educate people about how to properly invest. So that Thunder is like for me personally, that's one of them. Also another there's many, but another one is it's called Rabbit, where they do fast grocery delivery. Like they try to do it under 20 minutes. That's also from someone from Uber. And yeah, there's many. I'm sure Tamer will know as well, but there are just so many of them that they just started their own startups, and no, they're doing great. And I think it really gave what Uber and Kareem did. It got people to be very entrepreneurial. And because they were exposed to such tech, when they started working in Uber and Kareem, I think it got them to give them such an entrepreneurial mindset.
I have to interject here. Sorry, surely it should be the Kareem Cabal. Surely that should be the name. We need introduce some alliteration into this. Like Kareem Mafia. That's come on. Let's try and be unique here. Sorry, I had to say my piece.
That's fair, man. That's fair. There's so many of these guys.
Yeah,
right?
there's so many.
Like if you even if we just look at Egypt, right? even Cairo, we're not going to go as big as Egypt, right? So just Cairo, there was two pretty big software development companies. There's one called Link Development that was recently exited, and there's one called IT Works.
Yes.
Right. So these were the two biggest software development services-based companies in Egypt, and they've been around since the 90s. These companies have birthed so many companies in Egypt and so many engineers, and these guys have went on to start companies and build more companies and work in other companies. And this is called sort of when you have a cluster or a group of people that are working in the same industry, doing roughly the same things in the same physical space, right? There's something called the multiplier or the spillover effect, right? People share knowledge, people scale, they build more, they achieve more, their productivity is higher, they contribute more to GDP. And there's a lot of schools of thought around how do you nurture a cluster, right? Do you create a space for them and tell them go? Or do you find where they work and then you try to enable their existence in the space that they exist, right? So and you'll see that at the core of every cluster, there's usually a very strong university network of some kind. And in Egypt, that was sort of the Technology Institute program. I think it's called ITI, where the Egyptian government funded a number of sort of vocational training-ish type institutes where people could go and they would learn how to code and would learn technology after they graduated. And that created a really strong basis for Egypt's technology industry, right? And from that came companies, and from the companies came companies, and it just kind of continues in a more virtuous cycle over, many, many, many years. And we're starting, all of us across the region, to sort of harvest the fruits of that labor.
10, 15 years ago, when people graduated, they would be like, oh, I want to work for Procter & Gamble. I want to work for like the top multinationals. Now the mindset has shifted, and people want to, like, when they graduate, they be like, I want to start my own startup. I want to work for a startup. So it's very, very interesting. Like, for me, this has been one of the most interesting things, is people are embracing like entrepreneurial the entrepreneurial mindset. And like as Tamer said, it's a lot of them are breeding new jobs and everything. When people start a startup, it breeds more jobs and more people want to start their own startups. So I think it's very, very interesting that it's been happening in Egypt and in the region now.
I mean, it's more fun to work with a startup. You can work remotely, you can work from home, you can travel, you can,
Yes.
and there's it's not the 9 to 5.
It also shortens your life expectancy. So let's own, own it and give founders a little bit of credit.
And Tamer, I really like what you said about nurturing those clusters. And it seems that government can play a role in this, proven by that program in Egypt. And I think in Dubai, in Riyadh, even in Amman, in Jordan, there are government initiatives trying to do that. But what I've seen so far is it comes, it's like a grassroots movement. It comes from the bottom up more than top down. But I'm happy to see that this actually worked in Egypt.
Yeah, and there's another fantastic example in Egypt, in a small, sleepy suburb of Cairo called Sheraton. There's a semiconductor cluster.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's a massive number of semiconductor engineers who are working for international semiconductor companies, local semiconductor companies. And, we ended up investing in a company that came out of that cluster called Pearl Semiconductor, and they designed timing products, right? And this company was born from a group of people who were in another company that were originally in a subsidiary of an international semiconductor company. And then it's just a surprisingly large number of semiconductor engineers in a sleepy suburb in Cairo.
I love that. Okay, Jamie, what's the next story we have today?
I guess we're going to be looking at two VC firms trying to join the emerging markets party, I guess is one way that you could put it. So that's Briga, they're a Paris-based VC, and Hashed Ventures, who are South Korean. So Briga moving into the African market, Hashed partnering with Hub 71 in Abu Dhabi. So just maybe a small bit about Briga first. So they've launched a $75 million Africa Seed 1 fund. So the goal is to invest in early stage startups across Africa. They've name checked both Egypt and Morocco as part of that. And they've secured commitments today for about 70% of the capital in its first close. They've been active since 2015. They've raised 4 runs now, or funds even. They manage 700 million in assets. They have a portfolio of over 100 startups across 15 different countries. They support startups from pre-seed to Series A. In terms of target industries, fintech, health tech, prop tech, logistics, ed tech, essentially aligned with SDGs, and they're plan to invest 100K to 2 million in startups across African markets. In terms of startups that they've supported to date, they've supported startups in South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, the Ivory Coast, I believe, and Uganda. So that's a small bit about Briga. I might just quickly provide a small bit of context as well about Hashed, because I think we have an interesting conversation about both of them nearly collectively on one level. So Hashed, they're soul-based, so crypto investment and Web3. So as I mentioned, they partnered with Hub71. The goal, I guess, on one level is to introduce more Korean startups, especially in the fintech and digital assets side of things. Interestingly, I think it's the second partnership that Hub71 has made with a Korean-based sort of initiative. I know back in November, they partnered as well with the Seoul Metropolitan Government, of all things. Again, I think that the goal is, on one level, I think the founder or CEO of Hashed, his name is Simon Kim, and he cited in particular, I guess, a shrinking domestic market was part of the motivation for wanting to expand to Abu Dhabi. So on Hashed themselves, again, the exact same. They actually manage also 700 million. They've offices globally, also in San Francisco and Singapore. Hub71, they've committed over 2 billion to fund Web3 startups and blockchain technology. So in reality, this partnership makes a lot of sense, and will facilitate the entry, no doubt, of many South Korean startups into the Abu Dhabi ecosystem, which is growing exponentially at the moment.
That's very cool, right? So it brings us back to the conversation we've been having earlier about corridors, right? At Tarek Partners, we've worked with Korean partners for quite some time. We've gone there, they've come here, we've invested there, they've invested here. We have Korean LPs, and there's a lot to sort of peel in that story, right? So the more GPs that come into the region, the better. Fact.
Yeah.
Right? I would probably confidently bet cold hard cash that the entire amount of capital that has been invested in the region, what MENA plus Africa maybe, would probably be less than the AUM of A16Z, right? So annually, the amount of capital that goes into Africa, that goes into MENA combined is probably sub 10 billion, right? The other exciting part of this is these guys come in, they share experience, they bring experience from the markets in which they work, right? But the catch is that they need a strong local ecosystem, right? You need to have a network of strong local GPs, regardless of the size, right? Because it's almost like having a proxy office in that local market where you're investing, right? So you have people that you trust, people that you work with. And we do need to take this story and say, okay, how can we work to also scale the local partners for all of these VCs abroad that want to come in and invest in our region or on the continent, right? How do we build for them feeder networks? How do we find more companies and scale them to get them to the point where they can receive international funding, right? So there's two sides to the story. Do we have enough GPs across the continent and across the MENA region combined to actually have a healthy network of strong local VCs that can co-invest with these guys? And I would argue not yet. We're still so far behind.
So Tamer, you mentioned that more GPs is better, and I agree with you. They bring experience, but the question is, do they really bring money? What I've seen so far, and I think last week, I gathered maybe four or five international VC firms coming to the region. And what they do is they say, hey, we'll open up an office here and launch a fund, but raise it from local LPs. So I'm not sure if they can actually, or if they are bringing money. They're coming here to manage money from the region and invest it in the region, given the mandates of the LPs here. Is that what you're seeing, or do you see more international VC funds bringing their own capital?
So in the beginning, it's always local capital that has to take the risk, right? So whether it's through co-investors or LPs, if we don't believe in the ability of our own region, who is going to invest in us? So if we don't put our money where our mouth is and say, you know what, I believe in our industry, I believe in our talent, I'm going to put my local money into this and you can come invest it on my behalf, then how are we going to convince people who are not from this region or not from the continent to come in and invest?
100%.
Right? I gotta own it.
No, I completely agree with Tamer, with with everything Tamer just said. It's always welcoming when you hear that there are VCs that want to invest in the region. It shows like the importance, like especially from where we started and like the past few years, like we've been hearing about so many VCs entering the Egyptian market. And I think it's important because it shows you how much the ecosystem has matured and how much talent has come across. So I think I think it's really important. But what I like about Biga is that they're focusing on fintech, which is the huge in like in Egypt, and I like that they're focusing on Egypt and Morocco, and I feel like Africa as a whole, there's so much potential. Like there's a lot of actually startups that are expanding into the African region. Like I know, for example, Lucky, they started expanding into countries such as Kenya. So there is a lot of potential in the region. And I think when you hear about VCs entering the region, it's really, it does, I think it gets more investors interested. Like I think the past, like Tamer would be an example of Shuru entering the Egyptian market, or Plug and Play. There's just a lot of VCs entering the market, and I think it's a positive signal. It's a very, very positive signal to the VC world. So that's how my reaction is. It's a positive signal.
Yeah, and I love that we're on the map now, the international
we're on the map,
where startups and VCs, our startups are acquiring Silicon Valley companies. We had only one example, but we can say that this happened. And VCs from all over the world are coming here to the region because it's attractive, it's up and coming, it's booming. While we saw valuations and VC deals going down in the US, we saw it going up in Saudi Arabia and in MENA in general last year and early this year. So this is all great news for the region. What I've seen so far with the LPs who are government programs giving money to VC firms, whether they're international or local, they usually come with a mandate. This money from that LP has to be invested in this specific country. With these mandates for startups, it's good news that we have more money, but there's a burden on these startups where they have to open up an office in that specific country. For example, if you want to take money from Saudi, you have to open an office in Saudi. If you want to take money from Abu Dhabi, you have to open an office there. And the same thing for Qatar. So is this a burden on startups? And if we keep doing this, is this sustainable? Can we keep doing this? Or should we find a way to reduce that burden on startups? I've seen a founder who showed me 3 residencies because he got money from different places and he has to open an office here and there.
Understood. Like so we can divide it into 2, right? So one is how these government programs fund VCs, and the other is the founders that are trying to sort of optimize for how capital plays out in order to raise as much money as possible, right? But ultimately, everybody does that. right? So if you go raise money from DFIs, they're going to tell you, well, you need to put your money in XYZ countries. If you go raise money from sovereigns, they're going to tell you, we want you to put money in X country, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's their money, right? It's their money, and they will have a mandate to help develop the local economy, which comes back to the point where we were talking about just a few minutes ago, around the importance of having a strong local GP network that can co-invest with international VCs, right? So it's very fair that a country wants the money that it collects from the taxes of its citizens to go towards the development of their local economy, right? Now, the fact that there is information asymmetry and capital imbalances between the markets that's driving some founders to go into other markets and vice versa, that's very different, right? That's a decision that some founders make to optimize fundraising or to choose to expand to markets. And to be honest, you shouldn't really expand into a market to raise capital because you have no legs to stand on. You expand, when you expand into a market, you expand because you can, you expand because you have product market fit, you expand because it makes sense, you expand because it's the right time, right? If you go and set foot in some other country, in any other country, and say, hey, now I'm a XYZ country company, right? Is that really enough to raise capital? And many of the guys that have been trying to do that actually haven't successfully done that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's perfectly reasonable for programs that have a local development mandate to ask for the money that they give VCs to go towards companies in their local market, right?
So what you're saying is founders have to be more rational about this and follow the capital that brings them more strategic value, and where the market is more suitable for them, they can serve that specific market.
Yeah, or if you feel that an opportunity is larger and it's better to raise money in another market, just start your company in the other market, right? Like when Brexit happened, we saw the Germans kind of raise a flag and say, hey, look, we don't have Brexit. You guys can come work here. And everybody moved to Berlin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Everybody moved to Berlin. It made more sense. Right? So there's no reason why we can tell, folks in countries in the Middle East, well, you can't do that. Well, they can. If the Germans can do it in Europe with Brexit, everybody else can do it, right? We live in a free market economy, so to speak.
Yes.
And it's a competition, and
Absolutely.
people are competing on the best companies, the best talents, the best founders.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a massive contributor to GDP, right? It was the venture capital was a key pillar in why the United States' economic growth far exceeded Europe, because venture capital allowed them to raise, I don't know, I think the figure was maybe 7 times. So venture capital allowed the US economy to build 7 times more companies than the rest of the world or the Europe since the establishment of venture capital industry in the 70s, right?
Okay.
Even with churn and failure and conversion and companies actually making it statistically, that meant that there were more companies that were successful to come out of the US, and that has positively affected their economy.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's actually very interesting. The past the past year or the past year and a half, or I've noticed a lot. Every time we meet a startup, they talk about expanding to Saudi. And there was a moment, like I said, like the most used word, like the past year and a half, was either Saudi Arabia or AI. Like the most words that we hear, like whenever there's a startup meeting, like you can count how many times they would say it. And I feel like there's been also like I don't know if it's the word is pressure, but a lot of them, they feel like investors would want them to hear, we're going to Saudi or we're planning to expand to Saudi. But the reality is, like someone said it cleverly. He said like Saudi, the only thing that Saudi has in common is the language, but there's different regulations. It's a complete game. So you can't like just expect to go to Saudi and to believe that you'll succeed. And a lot of startups are like I've been seeing a lot of startups, and there's a lot of platforms that are trying to get startups to Saudi. Yeah. But wherever they will succeed, like Egyptian startups, I do know there are some Egyptian startups that have entered the Saudi market, but it's yet to like maybe Tamer could add in this, but like whether they have been successful or not, I think it's yet to be seen. but I do feel like they do feel the pressure of like in order for them to raise money and stuff like that, to say is like, let's go to the Saudi market, which a lot of it makes sense in the sense that Saudi is a big market. But but in the same time, it's a different like there's different regulations, and it could get competitive.
I think companies are vastly underestimating how expensive it is to expand into a market, particularly a market like Saudi Arabia, where GDP per capita is much higher than Egypt, for example. So for an Egyptian company to expand into Saudi, they would need a tremendous amount of capital, right? You need at least, you know, as an early stage company, you need at least a coffer of, you know, maybe $5 to $8 million just for that, just to go and make a dent into the market. But then when you come out and you're like, okay, I've got, you know, 6 or 7 months of runway, I need to raise capital, I have to go to Saudi because there's no more capital in Egypt, then that's not really going to work, right? If we can see through it, everybody in Saudi can also see through it. Like everybody can see through it, right? The reality is, if you're not going with an intention that is very clear, and you're going to, and you have a plan, or you've already there and you're looking to expand further, but like to kind of opportunistically just say, oh, I can't raise money out of Egypt, so I'm going to go set up a entity and get a residency to raise money from Saudi. I mean, I would feel that if I was a Saudi, I would feel that that's insulting to my intelligence.
Man, I love this conversation. So I was having a similar conversation with a VC here in Jordan, and we were talking about how every Jordanian company is also saying the same thing. I want to expand to Saudi. And I was like, okay, wait. So there are similar companies doing exactly what you're doing in Saudi founders. They have the talent, the passion, they have the capital, they have the technology, and they have the customers there, and they are in that market. And if they're funded with, let's say, $10, $20 million, and you're funded with $3 or $5 million, and you want to raise another round to expand to their market, how can you compete there? It's not realistic anymore for you to go there. Maybe do a partnership with them, maybe join forces with them, or be really good in your own market that they might come and acquire you if they want to expand to the Jordanian or the Egyptian market. That was my thesis. I don't know. What do you think?
Okay, it's not just difficult to compete, right? You need local knowledge, you need local talent, you need capital. Like, people are talking about expanding to Saudi market like it's opening a new store that's 4 blocks around the corner. It's not like that. You know, it's a very unique market with its own variables, its own challenges, its own requirements. It's also a very expensive market to expand into. The customer acquisition cost is tremendously high compared to other markets. Right? There's a lot of companies competing for those customers, and it's just not a thing you do casually or opportunistically to raise money. And it's not just Saudi, it's any market. If you expand to a market, you need to have very clear reasons. Why are you expanding to that market, right? If it doesn't make sense for you to go to that market, why are you there? For a lot of Egyptian companies, it makes sense to go to Saudi. For a lot of other Egyptian companies, it does not make sense to go to Saudi. It makes sense to go to Morocco. It makes sense to go to Nigeria, right? So if I get a company in my pipeline that says, oh, I'm doing this, and I look at it and I'm like, okay, this doesn't make any sense at all, right? Then I have to question that founder's judgment. I have to question how that founder is thinking. Why are they thinking about this? They're thinking about this because there's an opportunity, there's more capital than there are startups in Saudi. So people are trying to take advantage of the arbitrage opportunity. Or there's less capital, more startups in other markets, so people are trying to get out. But it's both ways.
Makes sense. Jamie, what's our last news for today?
Yeah, so the last story we'll finish off on a light note, well, relatively light note. So the eSports World Cup, they kicked off on Tuesday night in Riyadh. So also featuring the largest prize pool in industry history, so $60 million. I'm going to have to put in a plug here for FWDstart as well, because our weekly deep dive this week was looking at the gaming industry in the MENA region. So do check that out if you haven't already. But in terms of the eSports World Cup, so it's running for 8 weeks, featuring 1,500 players, 22 competitions, 21 games, all part of the Saudi's national gaming and esports strategy that was launched in 2022. The aim of that, of course, to create in the region of 39,000 jobs, contribute 13.3 billion to the economy, to the GDP by 2030, of course, as part of Vision 2030. And it's super interesting. I mean, nearly 70% of Saudis play video games. They spend, over $1 billion a year on them. The country itself, they've committed to spending $38 billion as part of the strategy. The public investment fund, they're looking to attract somewhere in the region of 250 gaming companies and studios. They've already acquired stakes in Tencent, Nintendo, Activision, Blizzard, Ubisoft, you name it. I think there's very little major sort of gaming studios or publishers they don't have some level of stake in at this juncture. So it's super interesting. And look, I think it's part of a wider trend as well, in terms of government buy-in to the gaming industry. I mean, I think you've seen the National Gaming and Esports Strategy launched in Dubai back in, I think, November, striving for something similar. And I believe Jordan as well has their own National Gaming and Esports Strategy too. So super interesting.
This gaming is absolutely it's there's so much happening in this space. I mean, at Shuruk, we launched a Shift Gaming Accelerator for amazing traction, phenomenal companies. I would even argue that esports, I wouldn't even call it, it's its own massive mega industry. Right? I wouldn't even lump that in with gaming. Like gaming is absolutely gigantic. And so some of these industries are so popular in markets like Saudi and Egypt. Gaming is absolutely huge, right? So it's good to see public policy also work to adopt and sort of scale what people are doing. So it's sort of policy following market trends, which is cool. It's exciting, it's different, and we will see so much more from that. And Saudi is one of the world's largest markets for gaming, and it'll be very exciting to see how the Saudi government actually works to nurture that cluster, which we were talking about a while back, right? So that is a cluster. It's a cluster of gamers. Can the cluster of gamers produce a cluster of gaming companies, and can we compete globally? And that would be very exciting to see.
I'm also I'm a huge believer in the gaming industry. I think it's there's a lot of things you can say, people could argue older movies or classic movies were better, but I feel like games are just getting better and better and better. And we've seen it right now on Netflix. You can even download games, and even Netflix are entering the gaming industry because they know how important the gaming industry is. And I thought this news, this was actually one of my favorite news to read, because I didn't know that Saudi is hosting it, and I was amazed by the number, 60 million as a pool prize. I thought that was amazing, and I believe that they were also doing this just as to diversify their economy. And I think it's just it has so much potential. The gaming industry is just getting bigger and bigger, and the anticipation for games are just getting huge. So I think this is welcoming news, because the gaming industry, I think it's still just scratching the surface, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger. And with AI, games are just going to get more advanced.
It's a great success story, because when I started to research the history of this World Cup, eSports World Cup, I realized that last year it was not named World Cup; it was Gamers 8, and the rewards were, I think, $45 million, the prize pool. And this year they're making it bigger. It's a bigger event, attracting even more players, international players from everywhere. And I didn't know that players can make such big amounts of money.
They make a lot more.
Fortnite, I'm sure you've all heard of the game Fortnite. I believe the winner won, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, $4 million or $5 million. I've never played Fortnite person, but I know a lot of people who do play it, and the winner got 4 or 5 million. This is prizes where you win in a big grand slam or something like that, but 4 or 5 million, that just shows you how much money is in this industry.
Exactly, and it's all publicly available data. I'm looking now at the list where they're listing the top Saudi players with international wins, and we have the names of the people, how much money they made, and how many tournaments and what year, and it's millions of dollars. It's really millions of dollars.
And you know what's interesting is that there's also the top YouTubers is someone who actually plays and comments on video games. That guy is making millions because all he's doing is commenting. So it's
watching gamers game and commenting on the gaming that is happening is also its own industry. That's also a ton of money out there.
So this merger between games, online games, and then entertainment, and add to all this content creation. It's a really good combination, and it's massive. I think we're going to. This is just as you mentioned, Tarek. It's scratching the surface. I think we're going to see much more on this soon. On these three components, new startups coming up to serve in this in all these three sectors.
Yeah, absolutely. Check out the opening ceremony if you haven't seen it. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yes, I watched it. It's amazing.
In terms of spectacle, it's just absolutely outrageous.
Maybe we all need a bit of a career shift.
I think. What do you think of an eSports podcast spin-off, Ahmad? We're still early in this journey.
Okay.
Maybe we pivot.
Maybe we'll make more money there. Right? Well, thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate your opinions and your time today.
All right. Thanks, everyone.